Hey, what's happening everyone? Welcome back to another review, Pragmatic Addict here. So I thought for this review I'd sit down and check out the latest Shudder release, Quicksand. Now I know that the latest Mission Impossible movie has come out. I know it's getting absolutely phenomenal reviews. A lot of you I'm sure are going to see it, but just a heads up, I will not be checking that movie out. One, because I'm just not the biggest action fan. Also, I have not seen all the other 6 movies leading up to this, but for those that are going to see it, I hope you like it. So when I was checking out the schedule amongst like the other movies releasing, I was like, wow, yeah, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning really is the movie this week. But with me being a horror fan and being quite a big supporter of Shudder, I saw a movie listed as Quicksand, and all I'm going to say really quickly, guys, is that I actually didn't see the trailer for this film. I read the premise, and from what I saw, I was like, okay, it's an 80-minute movie about this couple walking through the jungle to get caught in quicksand, have to battle the threats of the jungle while in quicksand. I was really excited for that. This is not that film, so let's just check out Quicksand. So the first thing I want to talk about is that when we're introduced to the main characters in this film, I really wouldn't have known who these characters were to each other, just because the way that they're set up with each other feels very janky. It feels like that mixture of like 2 strangers in a cab trying to spark up some awkward convo, with the other half being the girl of these 2 strangers just being a dick and having a fucking attitude for no reason. So like, if I hadn't have read the premise, which yes is basically this couple who are a struggling couple, you can see that right off the bat. They're in the middle of getting a divorce, but they actually go back to the girl of the couple, Sophia's hometown, and they meet up with a friend of the guy from the couple, Josh. And while they're at dinner with the guy's friend, it's made known that the couple are like frequent hikers, or they used to be. And the guy's friend is like, yeah, I know this spot. It's a real nice trail for like hikers. You know, it's got that setup where he's like, it's not that known. And the next day, Sophia's like, hey, I want to clear my head. I'm going to go on that trail that your friend was recommending. And with this being a little bit unknown of an area, Josh is like, hey, I think that it'd be best if I went with you, just because it may not be that safe. And so after that, they go down to the front desk, you know, so she can get like all the info. And what I will say is that this could have been not only a good scene to incorporate a lot of tension, but this movie overall, what I'll say is that there is a movie in here that could be made, that could be fun. This film isn't it. For example, when they go down to the lobby to get like the info from the guy and, you know, get like the map and everything, he's like, heads up, this could be a little bit dangerous. You know, this is a very unknown spot. It's in the middle of the jungle. And he even mentions like, yeah, you know, there are snakes out there, and Sophie's like, oh, well, I don't like snakes. So it teases you with that idea that Sophie's has this fear of snakes, and she's gonna eventually more than likely have to deal with her fear. But again, this is just something where this could have been a very fun movie. So what I was kind of expecting is like, it was gonna deal with this couple who's having some relationship problems. Maybe they're tourists, maybe they're on vacation, they go on this hiking trail, and it's in the middle of the jungle, completely away from society. They maybe get turned around, get lost, they get stuck in this quicksand, and while they're in there, they're having to fight all these different threats of the jungle. Maybe there's like a rainstorm or something that makes it even worse. Something like that, you know, like a nice, isolated, claustrophobic creature feature. And going back to the scene that I was just talking about, like, this is a movie that everything just should have been in the bag. Like, if this were my movie, I would have had the guy be like, hey, be warned, this is a spot in the middle of the jungle, it's not very known, make sure that you know, pack enough stuff, make sure that you know where you're going, make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into, because this could be potentially dangerous. You know, this is a big rainforest, there's a lot of things out in that jungle, God knows what. You know, just have fun with that, make it tense. And what I will say is that the build up to that, it just kind of underwhelmed me. I just feel like this is a case where it's like, less is more. This could have been a very simple thriller, a very fun thriller, but it felt like the makers behind this film had that fear of like, well, a very simple premise and a very simple idea is like not something that you want to subject yourself to. But the overall outcome is that when they're caught in the quicksand, Everything besides that is just throwaway filler that spoon feeds you as to where the film is going. It's very nonsensical, especially the filler scenes. And during the time that we're seeing the couple stuck in the quicksand, they do plenty of, I think, fine elements, which I will get into. But there's also equally just enough stuff where I'm like, this is already only like an 80-something minute movie. This either should have been a completely different film with these elements, with this idea, or it should have just been a short film. Which, what I want to talk about first is these characters. So aside from my initial nitpicks as far as like their introductions, once you get past that rocky introduction, we actually know who they are at a certain point. Like, just as a couple that can't get along, they really sell it. It felt organic, it felt real. It felt like that situation where this couple has probably been going through this for some time, and there has probably been, you know, enough background that has led them to such a toxic degree, and they sell it. The next thing I want to talk about is that when they get to this location, it feels appropriate in that threatening degree. You know, it's quiet, it's just them, and to make matters worse, because they are in the position they are with each other, they are not saying a single fucking word to each other, and it just makes it that much more uneasy. And what I will say is that as the film goes on, it does incorporate that element of like storminess where it starts lightning and Josh, the guy of the couple, is like, hey, I think that it's best if we turn around. And Sophie's kind of arguing. She's like, well, we haven't made it that far. I want to see the trail. And he's like, well, it's lightning. We don't exactly know this area. It's a little bit abandoned. It's best if we go back before we get caught in the storm. What disappointed me about this is that this is more than anything just a plot point. There really isn't even a big stormy, rainy scene, which how this plays out is that when this happens, when he sees like the storm coming in and he's like, well, I think it's best that we go back. Well, when they get back to their car, they actually become tangled with someone who threatens their lives, which sends them in a panic. Because they're in a panic, they're just wandering through this jungle and they end up coming across this pit of quicksand that is just God knows where in this gigantic ass rainforest. And what I will say about this is that I don't necessarily think that this is a bad idea, but once the scene was done, and even getting to that point where it was wrapping up, you do get that feeling that this was just for setup. And this is just one of those movies where it doesn't have bad ideas, and you may not know exactly where they're going to go, but while these scenes are happening and while they're playing out, regardless of anything, when they're happening, they're just not hooking you and they're just coming off as silly. Another example, the second that these people get caught in the quicksand, they're still having just these petty arguments, and I feel like this should have been that dramatic, like, atmospheric shift of the movie. This should have been that situation where you felt what they were getting into. You should have felt them in the situation. You should have felt the danger of that situation. You know, it should have exposed more personality, and it felt like it just kind of backtracked a little bit. But what I will say is that there are some elements where there are some decent scares. Like, for example, there's this one scene where she's like, I feel something under me. There's something in the quicksand. And what I will say is that I like that. You know, that felt good for like this, for me wanting this to be a claustrophobic thriller. You know, with that fear of the unknown, with this being in the middle of a jungle, you're like, well, what is under there? What's it gonna do? They can't fucking move. But one thing I will say is that there is a lot in the movie that downplays that fear factor of the movie. Like, for example, while they're stuck, it turns out that she has her purse on her. And the two sides that I'm at with this is, one, for how they chose to do it here with her having her purse on her. I'm like, well, I'm curious to see how creative they could get with that. But on the other hand, as someone who wanted a claustrophobic, like, creature feature film, I was also just like, well, imagine if they didn't have that purse with those, you know, resources that they could, you know, regardless, get creative with. If the purse was ditched, that would have made things just that much worse, and it could have made the fear factor that much worse, and it could have made the film maybe even get even more creative than what it did incorporating this fucking purse into the movie. Again, it was just one of those things with this just being an 80-minute, you know, thriller indie film about quicksand, and aside from the scenes where we're seeing this couple stuck in the quicksand, with it not being as creative or as, intense as it could have been, with them incorporating a bunch of throwaway nonsense filler scenes. It was just one of those movies that was very predictable, was very easy to kind of, make out. And I hate when movies just feed you breadcrumbs where they just spoon feed you the entire movie. I can't stand it. But what I will say is that there are stuff that they do as far as the creature feature based stuff. And as a creature feature fan, there was some stuff in this movie that I wasn't exactly expecting. Especially with this film's bigger, promo being about snakes. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I thought that the whole creature feature side of this film was gonna be snakes. And there were some times where, I will say this, as far as the creature feature based side, this is more than anything a snake film with that quicksand element, but they did throw in some extra stuff that, did make me a little bit squeamish. Another thing that I do want to say that kind of goes back to where I was saying, a lot of the moments with this couple is in the quicksand is just cringe moments with them arguing and everything. Well, when they try to do that character side where they're trying to focus on the character side and they're trying to show emotions and everything, especially on the guy's end, there was a lot of overacting, especially on that emotional side where it just comes off completely laughable. And aside from some of those atmospheric touches that they did right, and a couple of nods going forth as far as the creature feature element, again, this just should have been a different film, or this should have just been a short film. Again, there is a movie for this, a nice jungle-based claustrophobic creature feature. This film is not that. And overall, I'm going to give Quicksand a mixed review. So guys, that is going to be my review of Quicksand. Again, not much to say about this film, not much to take away from it. This was a film that I was a bit excited for as far as what I was expecting, but this film did not really live up to any of that. So for those that did check out this film, that do have Shudder, let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. But guys, that is going to do it for my personal thoughts on Quicksand. Let me know what you guys thought about the review down below as well as the movie. I will see you guys in the next film. Thank you guys so much for watching and I hope you guys are having a great day. Take care.